If a kid had conscious parents, imagine a kid who had conscious parents. And I know that we don't know that. Like that's like a unicorn. Does that exist? Are there people who had conscious parents? Put them in a museum. Like that's a rarity. We should be all visiting. Imagine there's a conscious child from conscious parents. I think we would just be in awe of that. I don't know what that looks like. But anyway, imagine for a moment that you have a conscious child who grew up with parents who encouraged that child to feel and allow everything and created the space and the skills for it. Imagine parents who their highest priority was emotional freedom and clarity and mental health and all of that. So from the very beginning, that was more important than math and science or anything else. So that child, when I try to visualize that child who doesn't exist, that's the problem is I can't go interview that person because I don't know, there aren't any human beings like that grew up with conscious parents. But my thought would be that that child would not need to meditate. They wouldn't need to be pointed to presence. I can't know that for sure because it's not my experience. But sit with me for a second and just ponder this because I think little scenarios like this can change the way you see all this. Remember that I said, and you've probably discovered, that the deficiency story is there because you can't be yourself. You can't feel and express anger, feel and express sadness or fear. So the false version of you has to come up and stays there as your identity from childhood on. So a child whose parents were conscious, why would that child need to develop a deficiency story? I can't think of a reason. That's my first issue with it. Why would that child develop a false sense of self if they could feel all their true emotions? And that's where I get stumped. I don't see how that happens first. Because of the direct link between the developmental trauma and the deficiency story. Now, I don't know. Maybe there's something that we don't know yet, which is the degree to which past life and collective and intergenerational trauma affects a child or a family so much that you'd have to go beyond just helping that child feel and allow their emotions. There could be something that they brought in. So, for example, we don't know quite yet, like, there are people who make the case that the deficiency story is somewhat genetic, that it's passed on. I mean, I don't know that. We don't know that. It's all speculation. But something to think about is if we're somehow hardwired for this because of the intergenerational aspect of it. Like we just believe it for so many generations that now it's part of our DNA. But okay, assume for a moment, and I don't know that. I mean, I don't believe it actually, because as I've woken up to awareness, the deficiency stories definitely disappear. So if they're so genetic, why are they so connected to repression? Now, in other words, repression from this lifetime. When I healed my repression, I did have to go into past life stuff and intergenerational and collective. So to the extent that identities for me were connected to that, I did have to discover that. And that makes me wonder about a conscious child. Like, even if a child is conscious, do they come into the world in some way with karma, with a karmic load that is beyond their personal life, somehow intergenerational, collective? Taking that into consideration, just for my metaphor, because I know that there'd be somebody out there going, hold on a second. It's not like you can just raise a child consciously without taking into account consciousness. Touche. I think you're right about that. Like, you have to take into account intergenerational. And there is no such thing as an individual child or an individual separate person. In other words, we're all so connected, it's not even connection. There's no separation. So, touche, I get that. But for the purposes of just this metaphor, just hearing this for a second. If you could have a child who grew up to where like any emotion, their parents were encouraging them to feel it and allow it, and then even bring up thoughts that are buried. Imagine the really skillful, conscious parents for a second. Even if a deficiency story forms in some way, I can't imagine there would be any real energy on it, because the energy of the identity of deficiency is the repression. Remember, emotional, what I'm calling deficiency story is in the body is an emotional deficiency. Like we feel not good enough, or we think it, but the feeling of it is like there's something wrong with me, or yeah, I'm missing something, I'm lacking, deficient, and that's repression, emotional deficiency, emotional repression. You are lacking something. Natural resources of emotions. Yeah, so let's just look at this child here who had conscious parents. What would the development of the child look like? I mean, this is all speculation, but if this child like doesn't have to hold anger back or sadness, I'm having trouble understanding why the child would go into their room and start to believe that they're not good enough or something. If that child had conscious parents and they were just encouraging the child to feel and allow everything, that child's not going to go into their room and throw a tantrum or disconnect or shut down or scream and holler and throw things, because the child's been given an opportunity to feel that with the parents. So right there, I get lost. I don't know how that happens. I don't know how a child who, let's just say a person who feels and allows everything, does that person need to be pointed to presence? That's the inevitable question here, isn't it? Here's what I want to do. I want to play, and I want you guys to play along if you're open, is we have been programmed to believe that in order to recognize presence, we have to have somebody there pointing to it, especially somebody who is awake themselves. And that's also disempowering if you think about it, because then there's dependency in that. I can't recognize what I am, so I have to be around somebody who knows who they are until I recognize the truth of my being. I think that sets up dependency, the same sort of codependency that we've, like, is it okay, mom and dad, if I feel this? Like, looking to mom and dad. So here, what I want to do is set something different up here. I want to encourage whoever is open for this, if you're already pulling away from the pointing and the first dimension stuff, you're already pulling away from it, then pull away from it and just do KI and make everything conscious, including the buried stuff, the primary repression, and see what happens as you're a conscious being who allows everything, where you've now healed your trauma. Do you have to be pointed to presence? There may have to be a little bit of pointing there, like in addition to like, well, just little assumptions like that I'm inside the body and not outside the body. Little things like that, like, their separation is real. Like something like might feel like that wall actually separates me from the rest of the world, something like that. But for the most part, I think if a child or a human being were given the space to allow everything, you're not going to be landing. That's the whole thing. You're not going to land for safety. So I'm having trouble understanding why that person would even be suffering at all. And I'm not suffering. And so I trust it to the extent, but this wasn't my path from the beginning. In other words, I was on the receiving end of some pointing. So I can't say that KI is my path. It's my embodiment path, but I can report that doing third dimension KI, it's not only do I have no interest in receiving the pointers, which I haven't for many years, I have very little interest in pointing. And I'm trying to understand that, where it's coming from, because I used to have some interest in getting onto YouTube and just pointing to awareness to people. And it left me. And it's leaving my trainees too. You should know, I just met with one yesterday. Again, another one who said, Scott, 4 weeks ago when I got to this work, I was really, really fixated on the non-dual pointers. And it's just a matter of just a few weeks, I just have no interest in any of that. But the thing is you guys are learning about this. And so now the first class that discovered that, they were shocked by it and even a little bit grieving because and also they were angry at themselves for putting so much time and effort into like these pointers when what for them, what they realized is that was all just to keep the emotions down. So when they no longer trying to keep the emotions down, they just lose interest in the pointers. Well, the first class that did that was shocked by it. But as I kept talking about it, the next classes that came in, they weren't so shocked. So the one yesterday, it was almost like a matter of fact. As he told me, I just don't have any interest in that. And I think it's because I was repressing emotion. I was using the pointers. That's exactly what I was doing. I was using the pointers. I'm being really honest with you guys here. I'm not saying this for any other reason. I would never take this on. Who would want to take this on? This is a ridiculous fight to take on against the pointers. I'm not even taking a fight there. What I'm saying is I'm presenting an issue that I think we should all take very seriously and ask these questions. I'm not saying that I know for sure that the pointers are appealing because of our trauma. But God, there's a lot of science pointing to it. And I just keep seeing that time and again, my trainees in third dimension, they lose interest in the pointers as soon as they start to be able to skillfully allow what they buried. So I don't want to just ignore that. I don't want to keep seeing that and just ignore what's going on there. But I haven't seen enough to formulate that I know it. So it's more like a challenge. It's more like, I think I know what's going on here. And let's let this bear itself out a little bit more for those who are already, like some of you are really frustrated with the pointings, right? Some of you come here and you're like, if you have to sit with another teacher pointing to awareness, you're going to kill yourself or something. You all, I want to talk to, because you're naturally not going to be drawn to the pointers, and you might be interested in why you were drawn to them. And if you're already doing KI, I think you're going to discover what it was for you that drew them to you. But more importantly, or drew you to those pointers. But more importantly, I'm interested in what happens to you here. So for those of you I'm looking for those group of people going forward, and I'll refer to you in different videos. I'll say, where are my group of people that do not do the pointing? And I want to check in with you, or just check in with me and just say, hey, Scott, I'm one of those, I don't sit with that card. I don't sit with any first dimension teachers. And I only do KI. And then I just want to know your experience, basically. Like, so if you're not interested in the pointers at all, I just want to know, as you do the deep work, aren't you just becoming conscious in the same way? Isn't awareness just dawning on you? I want to know if that's your experience. Because if that's your experience, well, then we know that pointing is not necessary. For some people, it isn't at all necessary if that's your experience. And I want to hear from you. Like, if there's anybody out there who's been doing KI for a while, and of course it helps with the healing and the unconscious, but if you can also report that has helped you stabilize in awareness, presence, I just want to hear from you. So speak to me and let me know. Or if you're someone like my trainees who you were very interested in the pointers, and then by doing the repression work, you lost interest. I'd like to hear from more of you out there so we can understand more about this and what's going on. I also want to hear from the people who do third dimension or any KI and feel like they still need to be pointed to awareness for some reason, like if that's still helpful for you. I just like hearing from people. It just helps me. So the more we communicate, the better. But my feeling, though, is in the end, even though there really isn't an end, if things continue to turn out the way that they're turning out, there's a big insight that's being seen in third dimension KI for many people, which is I was drawn to the pointers because they helped me avoid. It's the easiest way to say it. But I didn't know it. So I was unconsciously drawn to the pointers because they helped me avoid. And you wouldn't know while you're being pointed. Well, some of you do. Actually, through the years, people used to come to my videos and they would say, I think I'm just here avoiding stuff. But I don't think they knew how to get under it. See, because now we know how to get to the repression under it or driving it. You're going to want to know sooner rather than later if you're using pointers to avoid. Because every time you do that, you program yourself into relating to phenomena a certain way. You'll have to undo that. I had to undo that whole thing of relating to anger a certain way from these pointings. For us, for example, anger repressors or hurt repressors, we have to relate differently to the buried emotions. Instead of just having some agenda to just see it as something coming and going, that can't be the agenda because that's not coming and going. We have to have a different skill set. We have to bring it into awareness, see it, feel it, and then it'll let go of us. So there's my challenge. It's not a challenge, it's a question. Posed this way, if you do deep third dimension work, if you go deep in third dimension repression work, and you really start feeling and allowing everything, you should become conscious then, like awake more, because the unconsciousness of the stories and the repression, that's what we're working with, right? Especially on the body level. So through a process of making that conscious, you should be sort of becoming more awake, so to speak. That's what I think is going to happen for people. And as you do, I think it'll be natural because you're not trying to override your system. You're not trying to like hold the anger down and recognize awareness like I did. You're actually working with the anger and making it conscious while you're checking into the awareness thing. So yeah, as you do that, it would make sense then that as you're able to feel that, you wouldn't want the pointer. Can I just leave you with one example that a couple of trainees have brought up to me? This whole thing, so if we're in anger repressors, just as an example, because it could be any repression, but this is the one that I use because it's my experience. When you're an anger repressor, unconsciously you're angry. So if I have an anger repressor and I sit here before you now, even though I'm quiet, what's going on in my body is I'm fucking angry. I'm angry. I'm angry. I am angry, and I can't show it. I can't. It's not safe. I'm afraid to show it. I can't. But I'm angry. I'm angry. That's what's going on in your body if you're an anger repressor. Even if you're a quiet person, even if you're a very nice person who shows up very nicely to people, that's what's going on in your body. You just have to face the music on that one because that's what's happening. And discover it. Don't just face the music and make a story out of it. Like discover it, make it conscious. So I have a minute left because my new videos, the short ones, I'm trying to keep 20 minutes or less here. I'm just seeing what else I want to say about this. That's my question to you all, and I want to hear it back, basically, is as you do the repression work, are you more or less drawn to the pointers to awareness? And why? Yeah, I think we're learning something here, guys. We're learning something about why we're drawn to. There's more than meets the eye. we're not just drawn to awakening for a desire to be free. We are using the pointers, many of us, to avoid. But the question is, can you see it? And I think that you're not going to be able to see it until you do the repression work. Basically, as you do it, just watch your life, just watch your body and mind and see if you are still drawn to the... And by the way, even if you're still drawn to the pointing, when you feel the seeking energy towards it, that's the repression, right? So I've taught you how to go into that. So I'd be curious that even is the seeking energy continuing if you're doing KI? It isn't that even showing you that that's driven by repression? So the seeking energy is coming from trauma and repression. And then when we're sitting there hearing some of the pointers, yeah, here's the one I want to leave you with. It's going to be over 20 minutes slightly. I told you I was going to give you an example and I didn't. But the one, so we're angry, I was saying. We're angry when we're anger repressors. So when a non-dual teacher says, if there's anger or even that contraction, let that arise to no one, or that's arising to no one. Right there, they're encouraging you to keep the mind part of it unconscious. Because remember, as an anger repressor, unconsciously your mind is like, I'm angry. I am angry. Even though there's no self there, strong conditioning of I am angry and I can't. So when they say that the anger is happening to no one, they're actually, you don't know it, but they're encouraging you to not see that. Yes, the anger is happening to no one, the contraction's happening to no one, but there's programming there that's hidden that is basically saying, I am angry and I'm afraid to express it and I don't want to let go of the repression. That's all there. So to say to someone, let the anger happen as if it's happening to no one is super unskillful. Think about it. Because have you guys seen this yet? Because once you see it, I can stop saying it, or you can stop listening to me talk about it, but see it. Anger happening to no one. It sounds good because it's actually true. But in practice, in experience, it's unskillful because you have conditioning right here that's like, I'm angry, but it's buried. See? So by saying the anger's happening to no one, that buried conditioning of I doesn't come into awareness. The powerfulness of it. Therefore, the repression itself stays in place. So ironically, when you're given that pointer, let the anger or the contraction arise as if no one is there. It actually, because of the way the pointer is delivered, it reinforces the selfing mechanism because it just invites people to keep it unconscious. Whenever you keep anything unconscious, you're reinforcing the mechanism. It's all about bringing things into awareness, as you know. Hope this helps. I went to 22 minutes, which I broke my rule, but I am going to try to keep certain videos that deal with topics to 20 minutes or less. And I'm going to put the word short in parentheses probably to let you know which one's a short video and which one's a regular longer one.